Hey, what's up everybody? 8-Bit Flashback here. Today I want to share with you a custom build I've been working on, the Sega Tower of Power Mini. To make this build, I used the Sega Genesis Mini along with the Mega Drive Tower Mini accessory kit. And this kit is just a cosmetic add-on that has no functionality. It's just a couple models designed to make your Sega Mini look a little cooler, which I found a little boring. So I decided to turn my mini Sega Tower of Power into a functional setup by modding it with USB connections between the Sega Genesis, Sega CD, and the 32X, along with LED lights, custom logos, and much more. For the software, I'm using a newly released hack called Project Lunar, which supports USB OTG connections and allows you to add extra games to the stock user interface. And it also supports other systems such as 32X and Sega CD via the use of RetroArch. And I would like to give a shout out to the Mod My Classic team for creating the awesome Project Lunar hack. So I did have a previous video where I was showing off some of my early mods with this setup, and since then I've done quite a bit of stuff. For starters, I changed the main logo from Mega CD to Sega CD, so it matches the US Genesis Mini a little better now. I also added 2 programmable LED lights inside the case, along with a USB OTG adapter and various USB extensions and splitters to make connections to the Genesis Mini and my USB storage cartridges. And I will go into more detail about this building process a little bit later in the video. With this current setup, the power input is now located on the Sega CD add-on, which links to a USB OTG adapter that links to this connection right here. Then for the Sega Genesis Mini, I added a USB connection inside the case that connects to the Sega CD add-on. And I am able to access this connection by removing the expansion port cover located on the side of the console. And with this connection right here, this is how it communicates with the Sega CD add-on. And what this USB connection actually is inside the Sega Genesis Mini is a USB extension cable that routes to the cartridge slot. And located right here is where I can plug in a USB memory device such as a USB flash drive or my custom-made USB flash drive cartridges and 32X add-on. And I designed this to where it connects to that USB port very easily on the Sega CD add-on, plus it secures to it as well. After making the main connection, it also connects with a small micro USB cable that connects to the back of the Genesis Mini, and this cable is what provides all the data and power for the Genesis Mini. Now it's time to plug in my external power, and that plugs in right here on the Sega CD add-on. And here's a look at my custom 32X add-on. And I did do a couple different things with this. The main thing I did is I installed a USB flash drive inside this where I store my external games. And I also changed the logo from the Japanese version to more of a US logo, but this one has a little bit more color to it. Instead of being in black and white, I decided to go with some color to it just to give it a custom look. And this plugs into the cartridge slot with ease, and inside this is a 64GB flash drive, so I have plenty of room for external games. More than enough. So this obviously works quite a bit different than the original 32X would have. I've also got a bunch of custom cartridges that I 3D printed, and some that came with the Tower Mini accessory add-on. The Sonic and Knuckles cartridge on the bottom did come with the kit, but I did change that label out to more of an American looking label, but it does have some custom colors. The kit also comes with a Sonic the Hedgehog 1 cartridge, but that is in a Mega Drive format, so I didn't bother changing the label because of that. And I also have a bunch of custom cartridges already with US labels. I also took the time to make a couple USB cartridges. Here is Sonic 2 XL, and inside this I do have a 32GB flash drive, and that plugs right into the cartridge slot with its own external games. Alright, let's go ahead and power this up, and you can see those lights working for the Sega CD add-on right there. And these are programmable. I do have some monster LED lights inside there, and I can change the colors on these to about 10 different colors, plus I can change it to different settings like the strobe setting, which is probably my favorite setting right here. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, for the software side of things, I am using the Project Lunar hack, and this allows me to add extra games for Sega Genesis and Mega Drive to the stock user interface, and if I want to play games from other systems, I can use a program called RetroArch to boot the other systems such as Sega 32X and Sega CD. Plus, there's many other systems that are available by downloading extra cores. And here's a game that does not come stock with a Sega Genesis Mini. This is Sonic and Knuckles. So this is one of the mini games that I have stored on my external storage that's located inside the 32X add-on. Now we'll go ahead and try out my USB cartridge, the Sonic 2 XL. So I got a different game lineup on this cartridge, and of course I have the Sonic 2 XL game itself. Now if you haven't had a chance to try this game out, you should, because it's very entertaining. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 ROM hack, and what happens in this game is Sonic ends up gaining a bunch of weight. As he comes in contact with anything in the round, it starts making his belly get bigger and bigger and bigger until he can't play anymore. Then you just get stuck in the game and it's game over. Just the other day I let my kid play this game, and he's played Sonic the Hedgehog 2 quite a bit, and he just thought it was the regular game. And as he was playing, he started to notice Sonic getting bigger, and he was starting to get confused. And once he noticed Sonic getting actually fat, he just started cracking up, and he had no idea what was happening with the game. Now I'm going to test out some other games using RetroArch, and I can do that by scrolling down to the RetroArch icon inside the user interface menu, and that will boot up the RetroArch menu. Once I'm inside the RetroArch menu, I can select other systems to play. I got a bunch saved already to my favorites, and I'm going to go ahead and select a Sega CD game. We'll go ahead and try out Terminator. So it's booting the Sega CD BIOS now, and I've recently tested out a bunch of different Terminator games, and I have to say this is probably one of the better Terminator games. The Genesis version of Terminator is also a decent game, but I'd say it's more of a stripped down version when compared to the CD version. So now I can play all my favorite Sega CD games and 32X games on my Sega Genesis Mini. Here's a look at Sonic CD in action. And this is another great game. This is probably one of the best in this series for the 2D Sonic games. Now let's test out some 32X. We'll start off with Space Harrier. And this game is cool, but it's never been one of my favorites. It does have really impressive graphics, especially for the time. And here's Knuckles Chaotix. And this game's alright, but it's definitely not my favorite either. Now I'm going to go through a brief outline on how I did some of these mods, and this is not a full tutorial. It's just a brief summary showing a little bit more detail on the mods. So to start off with, I removed some of the labels and logos from the accessory add-ons and printed off some new ones using glossy sticker paper. Here's a look at the 32X after removing the logo, and here's what the Mega CD logo looked like before changing it to Sega CD. I also printed off some cartridge labels for my custom cartridges, such as Sonic 2 XL, and I changed the label for the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge that came with the accessories kit. And here's a look at some of my 3D printed cartridges. And with this one, I cut the back of it with a Dremel so I could put a USB flash drive inside of it. To install the flash drive inside the cartridge, I did use some glue. Then I used some custom labels on the front and back of the cartridge to conceal the flash drive. And for the 32X, I pretty much had to do the same thing. The backside had to be cut so I could install a flash drive inside of this and transform this into an external storage device. For the Sega CD add-on, I did have to do quite a bit. One of the first things I did was change the label from Mega CD to Sega CD. Then I opened up the case, and I did have to remove quite a bit of the supports inside the case. Then I installed a USB OTG adapter inside the case, and I did have to Dremel a hole right here. That way I could plug in the power to the USB OTG adapter, and that power plugs in right there. Then I installed one small micro USB double-ended cable along with a two-way splitter. That way I could plug in my LED lights and a USB extension cable. For the lighting, I used a Monster LED light strip and secured the LED lights to this panel located right here. Now to secure everything inside this case, I did use glue. These LED lights do come in a 6-foot roll, and you can cut these to whatever size you need, and I only needed 2 of the lights, so I didn't end up using very much of it. Now at first I did plan to use just a couple LED lights, one red and one green, just like the original Sega CD Model 1, but ultimately I changed my mind because I found the Monster LED lights to be more programmable and more exciting. And here's a look at the USB extension cable I used to route to the top half of the Sega CD add-on. So that routes over here to the side, and I did have to cut out a little area so I could secure that USB extension right here inside that opening. Then for the top half of the case, I installed a second USB extension cable, and I did this by taking apart the Sega Genesis Mini, removing the shielding. Then I had to make the necessary measurements to line up the USB extension with the USB port on the Sega CD add-on. Once I figured out the proper placement, I cut some holes with a Dremel. Once those holes were cut, I secured the USB extension cable with glue. And here's a look at a couple test fits before I secured that cable in place. Here's the same connection it's going to have with the Sega CD add-on. Once secured in place, I did go ahead and put that shield back in place. And here's a look at the top half of the case where the cartridge port is located, which is removable. And unfortunately, there was not enough clearance to put the USB port inside of this and have it hidden, so I did have to cut the flap doors. That way they could open around the USB port connection. And by doing it this way with my custom-made USB cartridges, they still insert inside the slot to a certain degree. And at first it was a little bit of an eyesore with that nice silver USB slot at the opening, so I decided to go ahead and paint it a flat matte black, that way it matches the Genesis a little bit better. And as I just mentioned a second ago, originally I did plan to have this USB port inside the cartridge slot opening so it was hidden, but there just was not enough clearance to allow the cartridge flaps to open without hitting that USB connection port. And that's pretty much a general outline of what I did to make this custom build work. Okay, it's time for me to get out of here. I hope you did like this video, and if you did, if you could, hit that like button for me, and have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and I almost forgot. Here's a quick preview of my next mod. A working micro Sega Tower of Power.